the controlling class is not interested in having people understand this because, first of all, this leads to the causal factors, the understanding of the causal factors about why humanity is in the current conditions that we're in. Many people will have no answer for that. They don't understand the causal factors.
Hi folks, I'm Alan Watt and this is Cutting Through the Matrix on the 24th of February 2019. So let's go back to what it's saying here. Partly because of the prevailing materialism and partly because of prevailing respectability, 19th century philosophers and men of science were not willing to investigate the odder facts of psychology for practical men such as politicians, soldiers and policemen to apply in the field of government. Thanks to the voluntary ignorance of our fathers, the advent of the ultimate revolution was delayed for 5 or 6 generations. The advent of the ultimate revolution was delayed for 5 or 6 generations. Another lucky accident was Freud's inability to hypnotize successfully and his consequent disparagement of hypnotism. This delayed the general application of hypnotism to psychiatry for at least 40 years. But now, listen, psychoanalysis being combined with hypnosis, and hypnosis has been made easy and indefinitely extendable through the use of barbiturates, some drugs now, which induce a hypnoid and suggestible state in even the most recalcitrant subjects. Now, that was heavily used through the 50s and 60s and 70s, even with MK Ultra, which didn't stop when they said it stopped either, and didn't start when they claimed it started. It was much earlier than that too. They were using all kinds of hallucinogenic drugs and so on. And it says, within the next generation, I believe that the world's rulers will discover that infant conditioning, and narco-hypnosis are more efficient as instruments of government than clubs and prisons, and that the lust for power can be just as completely satisfied by suggesting people into loving their servitude as by flogging and kicking them into obedience. In other words, I feel that the nightmare of 1984 is destined to modulate into the nightmare of a world having more resemblance to that which I imagined in Brave New World. The change will be brought about as a result of a felt need, right, for increased efficiency. What do you think you're hearing today about, well, sustainability? It's going to be, and they talk about efficiency for farming. It's too important, they say, at the United Nations to be left to farmers. And of course the big corporations say the same thing because they snap up all the farms, the small farms, and amalgamate into their big monstrosities. Your whole food supply is under a small handful, maybe even one cartel really. What a power that is. What a power, eh? And you have no idea. And you trust all. That's all that holds us together is trust, isn't it? Trusting systems you don't even understand, never mind even know exist for most folk. Anyway, Huxley goes on to say, meanwhile, of course, there may be a large-scale biological and atomic war, in which case we shall have nightmares of other and scarcely imaginable kinds. So he tells you where it's going to go. In Brave New World, don't forget, you have all as much sex as you want. In fact, it's a cultural no-no to have the same partner over and over again. You're supposed to take different people every night of the week, basically. Don't forget when he wrote that one, 1932 or so. That's Brave New World. That was quite an idea, a thought, isn't it? The abolition of marriage. Again, same as the communists, isn't that coincidental? Again, getting back to Quigley, we're often mistaken for communists, he says. You're talking about the CFR, Royal Institute for International Affairs, same group. Council on Foreign Relations. So there you have it. I mean, nothing's happened before I was born and since and to come. Wasn't discussed by big think tanks, by the way. Don't forget that Huxley isn't just talking off the top of his head. He belonged to the top think tanks of the day. Very secretive, very powerful, with incredible data. I've been flooding in every day on behavioral studies and so on. And even what he said here, what I've said already here, how many of you actually think about what wait, why is he talking? He's talking about Mesmer and Braid and Esdale and the rest, but the fact is, we now have so many subliminals just banging away. It's quite, whether it's legal or not, it doesn't matter, you're getting them all the time. You find the same thing with Freud's nephew, Bernays, who said the same thing, that this power to control the mind, is done all the time by the big marketing organizations that knew the psychology of the people, and they are the real power behind the throne, basically. Because they could tap into it, the unconscious desires and things that you have that you don't consciously think about very often, but they're always working on you, and they use them against you. So he puts on the line there that they could train the people in. Don't forget too, school is awfully important. From very early school, everything you read, even at school, your initial little children's stories, the authors all get paid to put the updated PC stuff into them. They get paid extra to make sure that's all in there. And the same with cartoons and movies and films. There's nothing out there that's not weaponized politically. Nothing. Not anymore. That's what we've got. Now he mentions too that Marquis de Sade. That Marquis de Sade was a sexual revolutionary. And all kinds of sadomasochism, and possibly even down to death, in fact, for that matter. And it was part 2 of revolution, you see, the end of this, what they called cultural inhibition, which is the only way society could survive. They didn't have welfare states by then, you know. They didn't give it to the public. Why should you pay for other people's children, or for their decisions for being pregnant in the first place? I mean, these were all big things at one time. When they eventually started heavy taxation, and came the abortion clinics and so on. You got to understand, we're managed like a herd of cattle, and those who manage us often refer to us as cattle, by the way, as well. We certainly get milked a lot, don't we? Everything we produce is taken from us. But anyway, that's a different story. What I'm saying is, it's fascinating to me. It really is, to live through the time when right is wrong. It's been taught everywhere now, suddenly. And up is down, left is right, etc., etc. All the opposites come to the fore as new normals, as they were planned to come out. But to read it years ago, even as a child, a lot of this stuff, and then you actually live through it and see it happening. It's mind-blowing, even though you know you're living through an agenda, and the script is written. To actually experience the big shake-ups that go on, it's almost exciting to live through it, because you're aware of it, where most folk are not aware of it, even as they're adapting into it all. That's fascinating too, just watching and studying. As I say, Aldous Huxley did give a lot out to the public in interviews, because he always started off his talks by saying his biggest fear for the future was overpopulation. What they'd never told directly to the public. Some of them did, like H.G. Wells. Wells hated even the British working class people as being inferior. He was terrified of them, actually. They don't differentiate between the peasants, as in countries like Britain to Africa or to China or anywhere else. They're all the same. I could go on and on and on, even though, as I say, I all week I've been just basically shoveling snow and try to clear the roof. You swear this stuff expands, the snow, all the time. It's the strangest looking snow I've ever seen. But anyway, that's a different story again. So I'll put up some links too to show you Australia, because it ties in with what's happening in Australia, as I say, where they're at the next stage. They're almost post-sexual. It's beyond sexual revolution. It's almost it's now into sexual boredom, I think. They had books out in universities in the 80s, for instance, on what their own teachings in universities would do to society as the students went into the world and adopted into their own lives their teachings in the universities, and how sex would become boring, and then how men might get fed up having sex with women at all because it was just so commonplace, etc. And how they would introduce all kinds of self-eroticism, etc. And all kinds of, and I've seen it all happen. It's in the papers, and people have floated through it without even thinking as to how it all happened. Isn't that's what astonishes me, really. It is so true, and I hate to say it. Bertrand Russell said, "There's nothing we cannot do with people, nothing," and that should be terrifying, because when you've lost your basic common sense and grounding into personal determination and survival, it's really over for the bulk of the populace. I hate to say that. But it is true, isn't it? I can still talk to those who are looking for answers, and it is so true. Lots of people across the world come in all the time. I'm glad to say there's a great response from people who have pulled themselves out of traps they've been in with all of this, and they've got off the drugs or whatever it is that they've turned to, because a lot of them who are a bit brighter will try and quieten their minds by any kind of drug, whether it's alcohol or all the terrible amount of drugs that are out there that really destroy you. And they're learning that now they know the reasons for things, they can investigate, and it really does empower you when you know why. When you know why all the ridiculous characters are presented to you on television as new leaders of all kinds are there, and what they really belong to, and listen to the things they're promoting, now you know where it all comes from. They're all fronts. All of them, folks. Well-paid fronts. It's really something to see. Politics is completely politicized in a different way than you think of being politics. Politics is a joke today, an absolute joke, as you all know. And they've managed to try and get everybody back into politics, and this wing and that wing and all the rest of it, to basically throw you off the track. They're all the same. The same agenda goes forward. I've watched it for years, since the free trade agreement for Canada, through the NAFTA agreement, into the new, this changed the name because we all knew what NAFTA was. It's the same group. And the presidents of the countries must sign it the next update of it every other year or so. And have been since the first lots, way back. Regardless of the parties, who's in office at the moment, what front group is in, they all sign it and update it. None of them throw it out the window. And the intent was completely in your face in 2005. It was to literally amalgamate all of the Americas into a single system, just like Europe, with its own individual government. Now Australia, getting back to Australia as an example, it really is, I really feel sorry for Australians of how they've been a tremendous test bed for a lot of this. Here right now, you've got some of Australia's top universities are accused of selling permanent residency and access to jobs to foreign students. Every country in the West is doing the same thing. So claims made that some Australian universities are effectively selling their residency. And a Melbourne population expert said the university is opening shop fronts in the city, and they're offering bare minimum courses to qualify for skilled visas, he says. We live in an age of incredible greed, folks. And since there is no morality, anything to do with even cultural morality is being tossed out the window for greed. Everywhere you look, it's the same. And it'll get a lot worse, by the way. Australia's immigration levels soars to a record high in 2018, with 832,560 new arrivals calling the country home after the government promised cuts. Now, that's not all the migrants come in. These are the ones, a lot of them that I guess it's probably they apply to come in. It reminds me of that old saying, it's a mythological saying of Nero fiddling while Rome burned. It's kind of like that, like party till you drop. If you're reading the papers as an alien looking at this strange place with these incredible big festivals they're having, and they're all having fun and so on. The music, wearing very, very little, and there should be lots of sex involved and things like that. You realise that most of those people will never have children, and they won't even want children. So they're being phased out, all of them, and they don't even know that either. But they'll have fun by a painless concentration camp, like Aldous Huxley said. They'll have fun until they die, basically. But they won't leave anything behind. Never mind another generation. So it's all working very well, isn't it? Another thing, too, with Australia, they always go along with the Western society, especially America, to do with who the latest enemy is. And because it was back to Russia and China, I said in the 90s in a show that they'd bring back the Russian bear, the big bad bear, if they start losing too much money in the weapons industry. And here, lo and behold, here it goes. But also China, and with that Huawei debacle that they've created, you find this, what we lose when angry China stops buying from us. Australia will plunge into a recession. It's strange, I said that last week, that Australia is proudly declaring, with its virtue signalling, its leaders are, how they're banning a new coal mine from opening because they don't want it sold in the country. But what they don't mention is when they sell it all to China is buying up, because in fact China's laughing at them for not having modern coal generators, which really are awfully good, because all that carbon that's just taken out of it through incredible filters now. But facts don't matter, right? You take away energy, make it expensive, people start dying, folks. Food is an energy. When you don't get what you need, the proper food, you start dying, you get sick, diseases come back. It's all part of Agenda 21 and sustainability. So China has said that with them getting this bad flack from Australia about Huawei going along with America and Canada, they're going to stop taking the coal from Australia, $22 billion a year. Now in Australia's all in panic, of course. And that'll be fixed very quickly, I'm sure. You see the groveling that'll happen. This is China, which also spends $10 billion a year sending international students to Australia, has hinted at a trade war in retaliation for Huawei being banned from installing the next generation 5G mobile phone network and the national broadband network over spying fears. Well, how come it's okay to buy all our computers from China because they're all made there? But one company, it's such nonsense, isn't it? The West system that runs the West created modern China. We funded them into existence. We funded all our factories over there with free trade and the GATT Treaty. The people who rule us all funded it all. They own shares in all those factories in China. They've never complained until now that all your computers and so on are made there. But this Huawei one is the big, oh dear, dear, dear. Who's kidding who, folks? It's quite some. And yet there's other countries not there that make all your software and everything. And it's a country boasting openly that they do most of this, the anti-spy work and the security systems for computers. And that the guy that is now working with them was the head of the NSA in America for a while. You got to laugh at the nonsense you're getting. And we've all to emulate China anyway. They're the model state we must all emulate. And because they control their population very, very well. And most Chinese are pretty happy people. A painless concentration camp to an extent. As long as you do what you're told and obey all the rules and don't say anything from your own thoughts, basically. They also have articles that welcome to 2019 where the phone is a weapon of deception, and a new study projects that nearly half of our calls this year will be spam. Well, who's trying to stop that? Nobody. I can see. And another thing I want to mention too, before I run out of time, I already run out of time, I've overdone it again as always, even though I didn't have anything ready really for this one, because of this last hectic few weeks actually, is Orwell talking about the press. And most folk don't know that he did the preface to his first book in 1984 that was taken off from subsequent books because it might offend folk, and he didn't want it removed, but he was talking about the press themselves and how the press go along with totalitarian regimes, including Britain. He said you didn't have to tell them what not to print. They would go along with it voluntarily. The so-called free press, right? But he also talked about censorship of speech and so on. And he says these people don't see that if you encourage totalitarian methods, he's talking about the far left and so on, which is no different than the fascist systems that they had. They're really one and the same thing. I don't care what you want to call them, it's the same thing. Run by the same people, actually, who own the whole system. To get change in the system, you need two sides. You create them, and you plan the conflict, and you plan the outcome. It says these people don't see that if you encourage totalitarian methods, the time may come when they will be used against you instead of for you. Make a habit of imprisoning fascists without trial, and perhaps the process won't stop at fascists. Soon after the suppressed daily worker, that's that we had in Britain at the time during World War II, had been reinstated. He says, I was lecturing at a working men's college in South London. The audience were working class and lower middle class intellectuals. The same sort of audience that one used to meet at the left book club branches. The lecture had touched on the freedom of the press, and at the end, to my astonishment, several questioners stood up and asked me, did I not think that the lifting of the ban on the daily worker was a great mistake? When I asked why, they said it was a paper of doubtful loyalty and not to be tolerated in time of war. So anyway, he ended up defending the daily worker, which even had libeled him at times. He knew to stand up for other people's points of view, or you're in a totalitarian system completely. The very thing you're supposedly standing up to fight against, you always become your enemy, unless you're conscious of what you're working through. People in a mob are never conscious, because they've lost their individual ability to think for themselves. Lenin, remember, talked about we shall win by slogans. Look at all the slogans across the board today. And the name-callings are just categories of slogans as well. And they're being encouraged for universities. They're the main, that's where I've said this since before, probably the communist attempts to take over the West years and years ago. They're all getting trained at universities, the top universities. Why would that be? Why would your Ivy League universities have departments where they teach communism and generations of future leaders to be communists? Unless it's the same group who are your so-called fascists and your capitalists at the top. And it is. In Article 2, cold outbreaks are not caused by global warming. And it talks about the so-called floods and animal migrations and disease outbreaks and so on, mass extinctions, all the terrible things that they warn you about daily through television, no doubt. According to climate activists, they're all caused by dangerous man-made, that's anthropogenic global warming. And this in turn is supposedly caused by rising carbon dioxide levels resulting from the use of fossil fuels. They might as well add alien invasions to this because it's all nonsense. Indeed, the climate scare industry, and it is a scare industry because that's the agenda, folks, to take all your rights off you. You'll voluntarily give them up and get managed. Indeed, the climate scare industry has achieved such a level of absurdity that on February the 1st, journalist Andrew Revkin reported in a National Geographic article that many stories in recent days highlighted studies concluding that global warming is boosting the odds of cold weather outbreaks. And then this article goes through it all and debunks all their stuff and so on. And those who've been following it for years know the cons that they've pulled, where they give you scary stories and most folk can never check it up, or you can't even find data to check it up and even ridicule it or believe it for that matter. Just keep churning out scary stories. But anyway, some of the experts too, like Dr. Ball, for instance, Dr. Tim Ball, an environmental consultant, former climatology professor at University of Winnipeg, Manitoba, said that Scavia's statement is utter rubbish. It's wrong in every aspect, from the basic assumptions to the interpretation. In fact, a gradient makes things move. It doesn't keep the cold where it is. So he debunks this latest thing too. It's just too easy but don't forget the real agenda and using all these excuses. Also, there's a Centre for International Governance Innovation. It's called CIGI. It was set up quite some time ago, actually. The University of Waterloo is a big player in this. It's in the former Seagram Museum in the uptown district of Waterloo, Ontario. It's now situated in the CG campus, which also houses the CG Auditorium and the Balsillie School of International Affairs. It's quite interesting because international governance and innovation, all the CFR stuff, Council on Foreign Relations stuff, is it's actually really part of it, as far as I can tell. The top members of the CFR who've already done positions in CFR studies and so on, and international development research centers and so on, and to do with money and the IMF, etc., and the World Bank, people who worked in all these kind of things too. It's fascinating to see. This is one of the big agencies for the CFR, Institute for International Affairs, call it what you want. It has many names for the same organization, but it's completely on board with the whole global agenda. And they actually use Waterloo, the area, for an area for their sustainability testing and programming and so on. And they've turned out somebody who's going to go across the country now, given a plum job, obviously, to do with municipalities for climate innovation programs and so on. Do you realize there was a municipality agreement there for Transition 2050 partner grant recipients? And it's providing grants to 10 organizations that will help participate municipalities in all sizes from all regions of Canada to reach significant carbon emission reduction targets. The same agenda. Eh? Get the cars off the road, etc., and decide how you're going to live, and how even building houses, where they're going to be, what kind of houses, yada, 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 yada. Did you vote for any of these things? No, you don't, and that's how you run, folks, by the so-called pretended experts. Waterloo City Councillor, where CG's headquarters is, bring climate change expertise across Canada. Okay? So somebody I've never heard of before. Award 4 Councillor Diane Freeman will be travelling across the country as part of the Municipalities for Climate Innovation Programme. Did you vote again for that? No, you didn't. And do you have a say in it? No, you don't. She says she'll be working with municipalities across the country to help them find efficiencies when addressing climate change. Now, talking about getting you out your cars and more plug-ins for electric cars, which are useless in this climate here. And they know that it's not meant to be practical. It's to get rid of your gasoline engines. That's what it's for. Once they're gone, folks, you can moan all you want when your electric cars just run down, or you can't replace the batteries after 3 or 4 years, and you get paid another 40, 50 grand for the batteries alone. Understand? Agenda 21, the main charter says that the elimination of private vehicles. What part of that don't you understand? And they also want to what you're going to eat and everything else too. There's a couple of articles about that. I think what's up with that's got that, and the fact that energy, to do with food energy, as I've said last week and before, even years before, I've mentioned that food is energy, and they're going to go after that, and they have been going after that for years and years and years, and bring you down off your protein diet into vegetable diets, and you'll start seeing yourself getting sicker again too. Never mind the fact that most of what you're eating now is so heavily contaminated with herbicides and pesticides for the genetically modified food. And Canadians, by the way, remember, were the unwitting subjects for the testing of the food, GM food, for 10 years before it was admitted that the government had signed a secret deal with the big chemical agency that owned it all at the time. You know who they are, to do it. They didn't even inform the public. We were informed through a big meeting in Britain at the time when Tony Blair was going to introduce the genetically modified or engineered crops into Britain, and there was big rallies against it in Britain, and that's when we found out from the NGOs over there that they were testing it out here in Canada for 10 years in secrecy across the whole country. But study our health. They know what it does, and everyone thinks they're free, eh? Anyway, it says, Iran-Contra and arms for hostages scandals. An old one, because Elliot Abrams is back in the saddle, and he was there in 1985, to do with the wars against the same countries, and, Latin America, and against Iran as well. Just same bunch, and him and a bunch more like him, actually. Pacific Islanders reject socialist proposal to trade sovereignty for climate change safety. And back in Australia, where you can as much sex as you want, go around with hardly none at all, but and take drugs and so on. But it says, is your home contaminated with meth? Shock has revealed that 64% of houses which are tested are riddled with ice residue, posing a serious health risk. It says they did a massive test in the Sydney area. 64% of the homes tested positive, and half of Australians have been bullied at school. This is interesting too, because the mental health industry are kind of kicking back at the same time, trying to get more power over everybody, especially children. I mean, how many children now are prescribed antipsychotic drugs, or they're given basically amphetamine as well, prescription for different ADHD, etc., and all these fake diagnoses. Because young guys have got lots of it, generally grow out of it, but now they're all getting drugs, so they'll sit in school and just drool, and they don't cause any problems for the teachers. Boys are different from girls in school. I know that because I've been a boy, you see, and I can remember what it was like, and they had to get rid of that energy and have multiple breaks, etc., to run around the place and burn it off. That's the difference. So the mental health industry is trying to get back, to get more folk on it. It says, half of Australians have been bullied at school or work. Major study finds amid warnings of currently facing a mental health crisis. It's interesting the particular group they're using to say they're getting bullied at school, because it was actually for a different purpose, as you all know what it is. But this is what they're trying to hit back with for putting so many people on drugs, so many students and so on. Because there's been so many bad raps recently about the amount of children taking antidepressant pills. Since Australia's mental health crisis deepens as the number of children taking antidepressant pills doubles in just 6 years to 100,000 after a spate of youth suicides. So children are killing themselves now. Do you wonder why, when all normal purposes, which it used to be, whether you liked it or not, just very straightforward, You grew up, you did certain things, and you end up generally having a family, and you worked, and they gave you purpose. And so they've all been taken away, folks, by design, by some of the folk I've been mentioning tonight, and many others who work in the same organizations. And when you lose that, you become nihilistic. You can't see purpose anymore. The electronic systems that are meant to spy on everybody and really control everybody are just that. They're not your friends. Electricity is not your friends here. They can't supply you with a virtual, real person, you, a friend of you. It won't happen. And to have real people in the world is becoming less and less probably able to actually find any who can be real friends with people anymore. They're all rather screwed up. It's not their fault. They are truly the victim. They're the targeted people. Everybody's been targeted for total change. And with nihilism of two, it's easier to bring in euthanasia, isn't it? They're already doing it in some countries since they introduced euthanasia, and they want to give them to people who are just fed up and depressed, so make it legal, you see. You see where it's all going and meant to go. And then life becomes cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and eventually they'll sterilize even more folk openly, not just in the ways they've been doing it in everybody so far in the West. They want efficiency, as they said, as Huxley said. Children deliberately overdosing on antidepressants and antipsychotics. It's astonishing. It says people born after 1997 are most at risk of self-harm poisonings, according to a study published in the BMJ Open on Thursday. And girls are much more likely to overdose than males at a rate of 3 to 1. And it's mainly dispensed psychotropic medications. Quite some when children at these ages can find no natural excitement to be alive and purpose. And do you think that's just coincidental, do you? And also the mental health industry is trying to get more. Well, we've got to deal with this. You know? No, I think they help cause it along with the culture industry, folks. Don't you? And that's really what is happening, isn't it? The people really don't know what's been done to them. They think they're, again, in a painless concentration camp because they can play until they're geriatrics. In fact, just play, take drugs and play. Don't think about anything serious, which keeps you out of the picture of doing anything that may alter the future. Just play until you're into an old age home, and maybe they'll euthanize you if you become too expensive and as a burden on society. They've got people in Australia, professors, who come out and said all that kind of stuff. We see nothing wrong with it. In fact, one of them got lots of airtime naturally. They always give them airtime, you understand, because it's a system that wants it. And one professor said that. And it gets them all these little clicks on the internet. Oh, they're clicking. You can't do anything naturally now. You've got to be sensational about it. But he said that the older folk who are in their 60s could maybe just die off. I mean, voluntarily die off. And leave more jobs for the young folk. So what I'm saying isn't some conspiracy stuff. It's from their own lips. And there's also an article too we could put up. It's from Conspiracy Theory, where the CIA came out with the idea of in the 60s to try and ridicule folk who were asking questions about JFK at the time. And they said, we'll start labeling everybody a conspiracy theorist, even though conspiracy is one of the biggest crimes in the US. They all start off with conspiracy theories in court. They're called conspiracy theories. When they go after different people, they find out certain things. And someone did a survey recently in the US court system, and they found out there were 10,000 initial, on the first search that they did, current conspiracy theory investigations going on right now for court purposes. It's an accepted term, and always has been in the court system. But when they want to ridicule you, they call you a theorist. Mind you, counterintelligence, for the same one system that runs everything, gives you your almost clones. They'll come out there and say the same things you've been talking about because they grab it all, and then they bring in aliens and different kinds of weird, strange beings to try and lump people like myself into that group. Even though I don't talk about the strange beings and so on that eat, drink blood and all that nonsense. But that's what it's called, counterintelligence. You bring out the leaders for that, heavily finance them. They're not out there by chance, folks. You have no idea of the scope of the war that you're born into. You have none at all. There's very little, if anything at all, in this system left to chance on behalf of those who rule, with all the financing in the world to do it all with, since your tax money pays for all. Anyway, I got to go out, I guess, and check my roof right now and see how it's doing, if it's still holding up all right. But as I say, I never prepared anything really. It's just that we're living through amazing times. And for those who are thinking about getting depressed, believe you me, if you get through life and you have 3 to 5 friends, maybe 1 or 2 good friends, think yourself lucky, because Plato said the same thing in his day, that that's about the average of what you might get if you're lucky. You might only get 1, you know, and you might only get 1 for a little while, because people do change. And that's another talk too, mind you. The hardest thing for people who are really searching for what's happening is to find others of like mind. And even then, you got to be very, very careful, folks, because there's a lot of frauds out there and con folk out there too. And lots of us say counterintelligence people who are put out there intentionally to waylay you on your search. So don't get depressed about things. There's lots in the world to be fascinated about, in the world itself, that hasn't been touched by those who rule it all. It truly is. That's where true life and humanity comes, is watching other things, even animals and so on. It's from that kind of thing. And from the occasional incredible decency that can break through from people in times of crisis. It's those things that you'll remember. But don't get depressed, because if you still have your thoughts, you can still keep them pretty well to yourself, and at least you'll understand why things are happening in this system, in this tyranny. And it's a tyranny, and we're going through a phase of it where it's becoming more of an open tyranny, where you're going to be punished for thinking what they claim is the wrong thing. They'll have other terms for it. They used to call it subversive thinking, and treasonous thinking, or revolutionary thinking. All the things which are not in vogue right now, which is opposition to tyranny. That's the crime in itself. Or refusing to be told what to call different things with new terms and all the rest of it. These are forms of tyranny, from the top down, not from the bottom, folks. Nothing happens from the grassroots unless it's authorized from the very top. Anyway, for myself, from a very cold, still cold Ontario, Canada, where it's possibly going to be an awful lot of, 8 hours of hailstones. That's a lot of hailstones and ice, then followed by rain, which will freeze on top of it. It's very slippy, no doubt. Good night. So I'll say good night from myself, Alan Moore, from Ontario, Canada. May your God or your gods go with you.